Some of the conferences and trainings that you've ever done have said some buzzwords that don't make sense. For example, here's how you lead effectively. You need to do active listening. If you ever heard that, it's like, well, what is active listening? It seems like it's something everybody says, but nobody can clearly define or let alone actually execute. And so if you've been on to some of these sales trainings or leadership trainings where they tell you how to communicate, but it just sounds like the same old repeated garbage that doesn't really help you much, or that you're not really seeing other people set the example for, continue to listen to this episode. We all know that communication skills are crucial for any relationship. And when somebody has those skills, oh my gosh, they make so much of an impression to you and to me. But we've also had those moments where we're really nervous to talk with people because we don't know how our request or our message will be received. Well, this podcast, fortunately, is going to go over all the things, the science, the tips, the tricks, and the ways to make sure that you can have the best relationships that you can through the way that you communicate. And after listening to these episodes, you can do so fearlessly with confidence, knowing that you can be relatable to anybody you choose. Welcome to the Attractive Relationships Podcast. So a lot of people, again, have gone to these conferences, and I recently went to one to evaluate the performances of some of the speeches and workshops that were given there. And what I found interesting is that when it comes to leadership, this company was talking about how to develop leadership skills in order to progress through the company. And one of the key components of leadership skills had to do with communication. How do you communicate with people in general? And the one thing that they did mention over and over again is that one of the key components was active listening. Have you heard that before? Active listening? What is active listening? What I find is that and I've been through a ton of corporate trainings where it sounds like they just keep using the same buzzwords without really explaining it or demonstrating it really. And active listening is one of those key buzzwords. And so they're like, active listening, active listening, active listening. How do people demonstrate active listening? I'll tell you how they do it. Most of them make the mistake of saying, I hear you, but, or, yeah, what you say makes sense. However, something along those lines. And then they check the box and say, I was active listening. And yet you and I don't feel that way when people communicate that way. Why is that? Well, because it feels oftentimes that they are just checking a box to move the conversation to what they really want to talk about or what they really want to say. And it feels like that they are almost manipulating us just to move past what we're saying to get to what they are saying. I don't understand how that is active listening. And what I would say one step further, active listening is more than just understanding the words that come out of somebody's mouth. All right? So, for example, if I said, this was actually a true story. I jumped off a second floor building because I thought it would be an interesting idea. Now, this is a true story. I was a kid when this happened and I survived, obviously. But if my mother would have come up to me and said, you jumped off a second floor building? That was stupid. Or I hear you thought that was interesting, but that was a dumb idea. That would not have felt listened to, right? Maybe you did something at work for you personally that was a mistake, but you had a good reason for doing that. And your boss comes around and you say, hey, I did this. It sounded like a good idea to me at the time because of X, Y, and Z. And then your boss just responds, I hear you, but next time you need to do better. Do you feel like you were heard by your boss? Do you feel like your boss understood you? And the same thing can happen when you're at home with your spouse. So active listening is more than a simple acknowledgement of somebody's words. It's more than just understanding the English language that the other person is using. Active listening goes beyond that. And if you're really good at active listening, the impact on the other person is so powerful that it'll do a couple of things. One, it will open up their mind to receive a new information that you are then wanting to give. And the second thing that it does is it makes the other person connect with and respect you more. And yet, like this conference I went to, all they say is active listening was leadership, and then they don't really explain exactly what that is. So here is what active listening really is, going beyond just understanding the English language or whatever language the other person is saying. You know you have done active listening well when the other person feels heard. And how do you know when the other person feels heard? Hey guys, real quick, I am sure that all of us have had the moments where we're a little nervous or afraid to talk to somebody because we don't know how they're going to respond. Are we going to be able to talk to our life partner without them getting upset? Or are we going to talk to our boss to get that raise or that interview for that job? If we ever get nervous in those moments, we have to fearlessly communicate in a way that's effective to get the things we want and need. And if you want to know how to consistently do that, there's a formula and a program on exactly how to do that. And it's called the Be Fearless and Effective Communicators Program. If you are interested in learning more about that, you can click the link that's in the show notes, or you can go to attractiverelationships.com/fearless. They will say some version of the phrase, that's right. And usually, what's even more interesting is that when a person feels heard, they feel like safe to be more vulnerable with you. All right. So again, let's say with the employer who made a mistake, it's like, hey, I really thought this was a good idea because of X, Y, and Z. And you as the leader approach this person and says, you know, if I was looking at things the way you did, I can understand how you came to these conclusions because of, and then you might even repeat their X, Y, and Z. Little secret, right? And they're going to say, that's right. And then maybe elaborate even more. That's when you know that they are respecting you, that they have connected with you more. And a very high likelihood that a new way of doing things that you present is going to be well received. Right? Or let's say the other person doesn't really volunteer. Maybe they're a little defensive. They're not going to open up a recognition of their mistake. If you want them to open up in a way that allows for this active listening, you might start with the question, something along the lines of, it seems like you had a reason for doing things the way that you did. Again, make sure your tone and your facial expressions match a level of curiosity that's intentional. Right? Seems like you had a reason for doing things the way that you did. And they're going to say in their head, or maybe even out loud, some version of, that's right. And then they will share in most cases. And when they share, because you're actively listening, you might also summarize what they said. It's like, okay, so I understand now your reasoning for doing what you did was because of X, Y, and Z. And they might again say, that's right. Again, this is active listening. Active listening requires a response that doesn't just acknowledge that they said something, but conveys that you have an understanding of where they were coming from and their perspective. And it is not enough to simply say, I hear you. It is not enough to simply say, I understand. We have to do things this way. And if we do it right, again, they will be more receptive to your idea and they will connect with you and respect you more. This is an important quality as a leader. This is an important quality if you're in sales. This is an important quality if you are public speaking, because even if you're on a stage and you have to deliver to an audience that doesn't necessarily talk back, you can feel energy when you do that. And when you see people nodding their head quite a bit, you know in their head they are saying some version of the phrase, "That's right." And now you know that they are being receptive to whatever it is that you are trying to help them with. So then this is just one of the phrases that I find is very much, I don't want to say overused, because it's valuable, this active listening, that phrase. However, again, it sounds more like a buzzword in most trainings. And so if you have been in these kind of corporate trainings for a while and it feels stale and it feels like it's not really getting the results that you want on a consistent basis, this is one of the things that I teach when it comes to your professional relationships, is how can you communicate as a leader, as a salesperson, or as a public speaker in a way that resonates with people, so that way everybody can get more of what they want and everybody can feel like it's a team effort. If you would like more information on that, go ahead and click the link below, and we can talk about these things for free, because this is what I do for a living and I'm just here to help you. So this is what I have for now. If you haven't listened to my previous podcast about the fear of public speaking and a couple of tips to get over that, I highly recommend you doing that. Until next time, though, I'll talk to you then. As we come to the end of another episode of Attractive Relationships, I want to express my gratitude to you for tuning in. Your support really does mean the world to me. Now, if this episode brought you any value, I would truly appreciate it if you shared this podcast with anyone that you think could benefit from our discussions on effective communication and relationship building. Until next time, remember, great relationships start with great communication. So stay curious, stay compassionate, and keep building those attractive relationships.